My name is Idan Nyago. I'm CEO of Epiphyte. We are part of the Elevator Group, which is a group of companies that works with countries to develop free trade zones. And I think today what I'm going to be doing is providing a teaser trailer for something which we feel is very exciting. I'll be talking about how we're trying to build a free trade zone that will provide autonomy and regulation for cryptocurrencies. And this is something I've actually been interested in one way or another since I was a very small kid. Long before I realized that cryptocurrencies would be real, my family told me a story which made me realize something about money. Just a generation ago, my family, in the middle of a frigid winter, were hiding inside of a ditch. They had sold everything they own for much less than it was worth, and they'd turned it into pieces of gold and jewels because they needed to be able to hide it on or in their person. And they were paying a farmer to live inside the sewage ditch that he had by his house. And this farmer, he would sit down every night with his family. He sat down with his wife and his two daughters, and he thought to himself, every single day that I hide these Jews, I am putting my family at risk. And also, come to think about it, why do I need to wait for them to hand me the money piece by piece when it's all right there? And part of my family survived, but not all. When I was 11 years old, my mother was sewing these gold coins, Kruger rands, into my thickest winter jacket. And it was my job to wear this jacket in the middle of summer through border control at Jan Smuts Airport in Johannesburg, because we needed to figure out a way to get the family savings out of the apartheid regime. And all of this came back to me a few weeks ago when I was watching an interview with a Cypriot retiree. This is a man who had worked hard his entire life, and he and his wife had pretty much spent nothing on themselves. They'd managed to save up a small fortune, which they wanted for their kids. And one night they went to sleep with the security that they had that life accomplishment. And the next morning they woke up and it was all gone. Confiscated by a bankrupt regime.
So there's this man I'm watching, and he has every justifiable reason in the world to feel proud. And I watch him broken to tears. Most people, when they think about money, they think about something which is an inanimate object of no moral consequence, or worse, they think of it as something which is inherently evil. And the irony is that they feel that way because money is the way that we as a society communicate value and trust. Not trust in one person in particular, but trust in society as a whole. What we do is we take something of great value to us, we exchange it for these meaningless pieces of paper or little bits of metal or bits and bytes, and we have to trust that society will continue to honor the value that we place in that. So when something starts to eat away at the trust in society, the first place that people feel it is in their pockets. And they blame the money, thinking it is the root of all evil. But that's nonsense, because what we do with money is we use it to communicate our labor and our efforts, our thoughts, our creativity. We use our savings to express the value that we place in our future, in our families, in our loved ones. Value and trust. But because money is an abstraction, it's easy to forget that it's something that we place our dreams and our hearts and our mind into. So, to try and control what we can do with our money, how much of it we get to keep, how much of our money we can give to other people, where we can let our money go, is to seek to control how much of our dreams we get to keep, who we can give our hearts to, where we can let our minds go. It's censorship of the worst and most dangerous kind. And I think a lot of us became Bitcoin supporters because we realized the need to combat this censorship. And Bitcoin has been a tremendous experiment in creating a type of money that cannot be censored. So, of course, those who seek to attack it have been doing so by censoring the old money. And recently, we've started to see that the myriad regulators seem to want to make it difficult or potentially impossible to transfer the old into the new. I don't know that there's a technological solution to that problem. But I'm here today to tell you about a solution that we are working on. An experiment possibly even more audacious than Bitcoin. Our goal for many years, and we've been doing this stepwise, has been to create a haven, a place for all people, a place where the values that we have struggled for in the virtual world can be put into practice in the real. And we are very close to having that. We are going to create an autonomous region where we can place those values into practice. So some of you may have heard of our efforts. I'm part of a group that has, for many years, been involved in this kind of work, and we've been talking with many countries. The most press we've ever received was when we changed the constitution of Honduras to allow us to create zones exactly like this. And we got a hell of a lot of press. And that was very exciting, but it was also what ultimately killed the project on Honduras, because getting a lot of press turned it into an issue for political elites and vested interests to manipulate. And the vested interests had no interest vested in change. So when eventually the Supreme Court, under a great deal of pressure from banking interests, in particular in Honduras, rejected the plan, it was a bitter defeat. But Honduras wasn't the only country we were negotiating with. And quietly, we've been working with a different country on a different project. And I'm here today to tell you about that project, because that project is very, very close to fruition. In fact, that project is going to provide us with even greater freedoms and autonomy than we expected to get from the famous Honduras project. And that project is going to be, I think, very interesting to all of us in this room, as it will be the first region in the world to officially recognize and sanction cryptocurrencies. The region that we are developing is modeled to be the Hong Kong of the Americas. But unlike Hong Kong, which was an inadvertent historical mistake, we are deliberately designing this zone to take advantage of the benefits of freedom. Our zone is going to include, it's going to boast the highest economic freedoms, the highest level of economic freedoms available anywhere in the world. Our security forces will have the mandate to maximize the security of people's property and safety throughout the region. The system will default to common law, and we believe that competition is important, but any individual or group will be able to opt in to systems of law that they prefer and live under those systems of law, which they will also be able to design for themselves. And finally, we will provide for public services through fees for service and land lease. So there will be no taxation on income, no taxation on capital, and no taxation on transactions. None. And I think that this is something very important, not just for cryptocurrencies, but for all of the emerging technologies that we have. 3D printing, genetic engineering, all of the wonderful things that potentially can happen. William Gibson once described Singapore as Disneyland with a death penalty. So we think of this as a Tomorrowland with an immigration policy. Thank you. What we are purposely doing is we are creating the smallest possible government to create the largest possible space for innovation and competition on public services. Our key constraint is that we will need to abide by international treaties that are mandatory and are beyond the discretion of any particular sovereign. But beyond that, we expect to see a quantum leap in the way we think about public service. Now, we also do not intend on making the same mistake twice. So I know that the key question that everyone wants to ask, and also has been asking me on the forums, is where is this going to be? We have an agreement with the country that neither we nor the host country will announce where the zone is going to be until everything is finalized this time, because we don't want to waste our time or your time. But we are very, very close. We expect that we will make this announcement in November. And in the meantime, we can provide some additional information in closed talks. So if you are interested in this, I'm happy to speak to you afterwards. But in the meantime, there are many details that we can reveal. And at this conference in particular, because you are, I think, the community which understands more than any what we are trying to do, I'd like to talk about what I think this can do for cryptocurrencies. And my major involvement has been on the cryptocurrency side. And I think there's 7 key things that we will be able to do for cryptocurrencies. The first is that at the moment, and this entire conference, everyone's been talking about regulatory pressures. So we need to have a place where there is regulatory certainty. The second is we need to make sure that there's a way to use traditional forms of money, like banking and credit cards, in a zone, and that's something we will be able to provide. A third thing is that we need to legalize financial innovation, real financial innovation. And at the same time, we want to make it much easier to integrate with traditional finance and the large amounts of money that are there. And this means that we should be able to scale cryptocurrencies to a proper economic scale, while at the same time working from the bottom up to allow people to perform everyday transactions in our zone using cryptocurrencies. And finally, and perhaps most important, we need to make cryptocurrencies seem less weird to my mother. So let's start with the first, regulatory certainty. I think the key thing to understand is that the major danger to cryptocurrencies is not that they will be legislated out of existence. It is that they will be regulated out of usefulness. The distributed nature of cryptocurrencies probably makes Bitcoin impossible to destroy at this point. Probably. But what governments can do, and do very easily, is make it so onerous and legally fraught to perform legal actions with cryptocurrencies that they become useless for that purpose. By reducing Bitcoin to a purely black market currency, they can make it useless not just for regular people, but for all of us. Why? I mean, you'll still be able to go to Satoshi Dice and gamble your Bitcoins and take your winnings and go to the Silk Road, which is probably sitting in the audience right now, and spend your coins. But that is such a small and limited economy that it's not clear that it's self-sustaining. It used to be because people thought it might turn into something else. But if regulation becomes impossible, then even that hope is gone. And if you're a merchant on the Silk Road, why would you exchange your awesome drugs for useless tokens? So we need to have a region where there is certainty that you'll be able to exchange your coins for something useful. And the problem is that regulators now are starting to compete amongst each other for who gets to regulate Bitcoin the most. And the shoes haven't dropped yet. Our greatest fear is probably the most powerful organization that nobody's ever heard of, which is FATF, the Financial Action Task Force of the OECD. And this is the organization that in just over the last few years have managed to take on and crush the financial independence of countries that have for years managed to maintain that financial independence. We're talking about all of pretty much everyone, but the Caymans, the Bahamas, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Singapore, and they took on 2 countries and forced their surrender that are notorious for being immune to pressure. Does anyone want to guess what those 2 countries are? Exactly. Switzerland's one. That's the easy one. The harder one was Putin's Russia, which they literally blacklisted. So now all of these countries have, this is despite the fact that FATF have no official power at all. They have no authority. And yet, all of these countries have now accepted FATF-recommended regulation and have opened their banking secrets to OECD regulators. So there is no country in the world that if the OECD and FATF decided to make a concerted effort to make Bitcoin unattractive would be able to resist. And what's worse is that in many countries like the UK, Israel, Canada, and there are some signs that possibly in the US as well, banks are doing the work for them precisely because FATF have not said anything. So like media outlets in China, they are self-censoring. And this is the power of FATF. So what we need is one zone, at least, that will not self-censor or quietly buckle under pressure. So our little autonomy may not be able to do what Putin's Russia couldn't do, but what we can do is fight. And if there is an issue, drag it out of the shadows of bureaucracy and into the light of public debate. All of these regulatory agencies have taken advantage of the fact that they operate in the murk of regulatory morass. It's not clear that they would win, or even if they could, want to pick a fight where they were dragged into the public arena. A second part of this is working with the people who actually lobby these people, the banks. At the moment, you know, the banks have a problem, and so does anyone who wants to use regular money. Banking is the most regulated industry, and that regulation was created long before cryptocurrencies. So in pretty much every single country in the world, to try and have a legitimate bank which uses cryptocurrencies and has cryptocurrency-based exchanges and transactions is impossible. But we can invite the large banks who do operate in all of, for example, the Caribbean islands, to do exactly that with us. And more so, we'd like to see the people in this room come and start new kinds of banking. And by doing so, we also make it much easier, and we see this as the tip of the iceberg, to legalize real financial innovation. So financial innovation today has a very bad name, justifiably so. What it typically means is creating new kinds of exotic derivatives like credit default swaps, which don't particularly swap anything, and things like high-frequency algorithmic trading. But when we think about innovation, what we really mean is new kinds of products and services that help the consumer. That kind of thing is very difficult or impossible to do in developed countries today. So if you are an entrepreneur or business person who is interested in creating P2P loan system, or cryptocurrency-backed security exchanges, or prediction markets, or cryptographically mandated contracts, we want to provide a way for you to do that. And at the same time, allow you to raise the kind of money that will make that a real deal. So there are really basic things that could help cryptocurrencies. At the moment, cryptocurrencies are this alien thing. FinCEN have said that there's some kind of thing, but they're not entirely sure what. But there is easy regulation around exchanging money. It's called Forex. So if we can get basic things like an ISO 4217 for currencies, then suddenly these currencies can start being exchanged on regular Forex markets, regular future markets, and now it's possible for large institutional investors to get involved. And we want them to get involved because we much prefer to have them as our allies than as our enemies. And this means that we can scale. You know what isn't cool? $1 million isn't cool. $1 billion isn't cool. You know what's cool? The GDP of a small country. So at the moment, Bitcoin is like $1.5 billion in terms of its monetary base, which is roughly what Facebook paid for Instagram, which is the world's way of saying, we value Bitcoin as much as taking pictures of our brunch. So, you know what, they're right, because wealthy individuals and businesses can't actually do anything with Bitcoin. You make a small transaction, even something of a small number of millions, and the markets go crazy. So we need scale to make Bitcoin useful for all kinds of the things that we use currency for. But at the same time, we want to work from the bottom up, because the holy grail for any currency is the ability to use it in everyday transactions, to buy your groceries in it, to accept a salary in it, to pay your cell phone bill. At the moment, that is monopolized by national currencies. And it's hard to fight that scale. But if you have a place to start fresh, now we can have a level playing field for these currencies. And I expect that we will see these currencies blossom. So if there are people in the audience who have great POS systems that they think they could use with cryptocurrencies as a way to make transactions between individuals in developing world useful, please talk to me. We're looking to try and see how we can implement the best systems. And finally, let's make these currencies less weird. At the moment, when people think of money, they think of something that is created by a state. Now, that perception is going to change, but it will take time. In the meantime, we can speed adoption if people know that, oh, cryptocurrencies, yeah, there's an area, there's a state where this is allowed. And that is exactly the legislation that we are working to have and that we will be able to announce soon. So, Bitcoin has been an ongoing experiment. But already, something surprising and I think unexpected came of it. A lot of us were becoming disheartened with the idea that democracy or technology would ever fulfill their promise to provide us with freedom. And then Bitcoin came along. This coin that is supposed to work without trust created this community of trust and has become a rallying flag for all of us. I think now it's time to take this flag and plant it somewhere. So if you are an entrepreneur and you want to do business in a place where you can expend your efforts on giving kick-ass service to customers instead of trying to make sure that somebody doesn't hand you your ass, please talk to us. And if you are the kind of person who wants to be a pioneering early adopter and help us come to the region and become the earliest DNA of what builds this region's character, please come talk to us. And maybe you'll get the same benefits that early adopters of Bitcoin got. And if you are a newly minted Bitcoin millionaire and you understand that what we're trying to do is going to enhance both your vision and your wealth, well, talk to us because we're looking for investors. Crypto coins and free cities are mutually reinforcing ideas whose time has come. Crypto coins can be the basis for a free, open, and prosperous society, and free cities can be a place for that society to live. Crypto coins can produce wealth, and free cities can provide the air cover for crypto coins to do that. We have carved out freedom in the virtual world. It's time to do it on the ground. For me, that's our next big experiment. Now, I expect there are many questions, so I'll try and answer as many as possible, and I will also stay to answer as many questions as possible. Also, I have a bunch of business cards over there, if anyone's interested. Please. Yes, please, sir.
So you mentioned that you're looking for people to join your enterprise.
Yes.
And I'm sure that among those who really understand this idea, there are two kinds of people. Those who would go there right away the next day you open up, and then there are some people who would go there, well, maybe when it takes off, at least a little bit, right? So if we're talking about those very early adopters, what kind of people are you looking for specifically? Like, what could be useful? Because I'm sure a lot of those people willing to jump in, they want to know if they can be useful and how can they be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what we are doing is we are building a society. And anyone can be useful in a society because a society needs people first and foremost. But we are looking for people who have, and you don't even necessarily need to come down to live with us. We are looking for people who will help us work with the media. We're looking for people who have graphic skills to help us create documentation. We're looking for people who have legal skills. We're looking for people who have a deep understanding of finance or cryptocurrencies. We're looking for people who run businesses and want to work in a zero taxation environment. We're looking for people who want to hire people. We're looking really for everyone. There's going to be a great deal of opportunity in real estate development, in creating new businesses, and in working in your own countries as ambassadors. So really we're looking for everyone.
If Putin's Russia couldn't stand up to FATC, what makes you think your host country will stand up to FATC and others?
Yeah. So we don't expect our host country to stand up to anyone in that respect. We are being very careful to make sure that we within the bounds of the law and with FATF. So that means we're talking to FinCEN, it means we're talking to FATF, it means we're talking to all of these different organizations, and we're looking at their regulation very carefully. At the same time, we think that there is a lack of clarity around cryptocurrencies, and we can help them work through that lack of clarity. So if you are operating in fiat currencies, like national currencies that we're familiar with, you will be operating under FATF regulation because that's the way the world works. If you're working under cryptocurrencies, then you'll be working under regulation that we'll help define, which will be defined with your assistance. So we have a great opportunity here to help them figure out how to regulate these things. And within each sovereign zone, until the point where you start transacting with the international financial system, which is the national currencies, you have full autonomy over the way that you operate your monetary and financial systems.
Hello, I'm Chris, I'm from Germany. We've had in Europe a couple of tax scandals over the last years. People getting their money to tax oases, British Virgin Islands, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
We've also had regulation issues, and we've come to view, after the financial crisis, we've come to view no regulation really as one cause, one reason for turning the world into turmoil. And now you are trying to create a new tax oasis. And I think that's something that is really dangerous. I think the idea is really bad, and I can just warn Bitcoiners to embrace that idea. So yeah, my question is just, why are you trying to create a new black hole for global economy? Why do you want to stand outside of society?
Thank you. In no way do we intend to stand outside of society. I mean, look, we're in the middle of San Jose right now. And we're not creating a black hole. We do think that if you... Look, the country that we are going to be helping develop is more akin to a black hole than either Europe or the US. These are places that suffer from a great deal of poverty because they don't have good governance. It's important that we can provide good governance. Now, what we are providing is in no way a leakage for taxation in any way that it's different from a Delaware corporation. So we will abide by any international rule that we are expected to abide by, and we expect every resident
Which international rule will that be?
FATF regulation, for example. We will comply completely with FATF regulation so long as we are dealing with what FATF regulation deals with, which is national currencies.
So you bill yourselves as what's going to be the first zone to actually recognize cryptocurrencies. So what specifically would that entail? Like, if you intend to be a free city, why would you specifically need laws to sort of recognize cryptocurrency?
So that's an excellent question. It's something we've hotly debated amongst ourselves, whether or not it even makes sense for us to sanction particular currencies. You're right, it's a mark on the purity of what we're trying to do. But it's a mark on the purity of what we're trying to do because we want to have currency competition that we are willing to accept, because at the moment the world doesn't have a regulatory regime which accepts these non-state currencies. By having sovereign backing, these currencies will be able to integrate with much lower regulatory barriers into the rest of the economy, and we feel that in the short term, that is something which is going to benefit the community widely enough to be worth the ideological blemish.
Yeah.
I actually have a two-part question. Are you involved with Paul Romer? Epiphyte is?
That's an excellent question. No. Paul Romer's plan is very top-down. Paul Romer also was in talks with the government of Honduras while we were, and the government of Honduras eventually signed an agreement with us. And the reason they chose to work with us is because Paul Romer's plan had two major faults. One, it required $100 billion in startup cash, and two, it required the government of Canada or some other large Western country to take control of the region. We see no reason for either of those. We're building our area, our free city, under the best, under the best advice of history and freedom, which is to say the Wild West, and any immigrant population that is ever built, we're building it like a startup.
Okay. So if that's the case, my second question is, if you were referring to this country as somewhat of a black hole, considering...
No, I'm not. It's going to be a wonderfully beautiful blossom of prosperity on tropical beaches.
I'm talking currently, but currently, considering that you're from South Africa, how much consideration have you given to the inevitable cries of colonialism that are going to arise from this?
Yeah, everybody who will be living in our zone will be living there voluntarily, and it will be entirely opt-in. So we will not be taking over a region where there is an existing population who will we be forcing to live under new rules. And that's very important to us, because we don't want in any way to be colonial, even if we do think that we're bringing preferable governance.
Okay, thanks. That was, I think, directly in response to my question about Paul Romer as well, because that was a huge issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eden, thank you for a fascinating talk. I think I may have missed something, but you gave a long list of the taxes you would not have.
Yes.
How will you pay for government services?
It's an excellent question. So government services will be paid for in two key ways. The first is that when you look at Hong Kong or Dubai, they experienced land value gains of over 1,000% in the space, well, Dubai was over 1,000% in the space of less than a decade, and Hong Kong experienced that in slightly less than 2 decades. So the major way that we're going to be funding this is a way which incentivizes us to provide the best possible services, which is to say that we will need to create a zone that is so attractive that it attracts people. We see land value gains, and as a result, we can profit from the leases. At the same time, there will be certain services that they are fee for service. So, for example, if you sign a contract with somebody, then you pay a stamp fee, and now that is essentially an insurance fee that makes sure that that arbitrator will arbitrate the case in the case of a dispute. So rather than imposing the cost on everyone, we, where possible, impose the cost on the particular parties who are involved as a service.
Sorry, I was taking a few more notes. The gentleman who was up before, he raised some really critical points. I don't want to be the killjoy either. I like your utopian idea. I mean, it's Galt's Gulch, it's Ayn Randian in a way.
Please don't brand it that way.
Okay, skipping that and not making it the black hole. But
between Galt's Gulch and a black hole, you know,
but the fundamental part that gets skipped over that I'm having a hard time grasping is why can't I just start a bank account there, transfer my money there, and not live there? And what's to keep out the drug lord or somebody else from coming over and ruining this great idea that you're creating? I mean, those are the questions that
those are excellent questions. So I'll give two different answers. Regarding the first, if you want to transfer your money into a bank account in our zone, please do.
At no taxation? I mean, somebody's going to...
If you are operating in a country and not paying taxes, if you're operating in the US and not paying US taxes, then you are in violation of US law, and we would advise you not to do that. However, if you are operating in our zone, or if you have already paid your taxes in the US and transfer funds outside of the US, that is perfectly legal and something that we'd be happy to have you do. Regarding drug lords are not interested in places with really good governments. Wow,
but they're going to be interested in something new that they can take over.
I very much doubt. Look, the truth is that the drug lords already control that region. They're not going to want to try and fight for a piece of land where the export of narcotics is illegal and where there's a strong security presence, which is going to be very expensive to try and deal with, and probably beyond their means to deal with. So we aren't worried about that. That's not a concern, because we've taken the precautions necessary to make sure that doesn't happen.
I don't want to waste your time, but still back to question one. If I have a bank account there, I have money there, and I use that money, and I go out and make money on Satoshi Dice or something else, it comes back to that bank account, and you have a no-tax law, and the money started there?
Yeah.
That's legal?
It is. It is legal. Of course it's legal. It's the same as if you were to have an account in, say, Switzerland, or you were to have an account in Hong Kong.
But then I have to report it to the country of my origin.
Yes, you should report it.
I'm
not a lawyer, but I'm not providing you legal advice, but I would suggest that you don't commit crimes in the US.
I'm not trying to.
One more minute? Thank you.
So, interesting, obviously. Could you talk a bit more about the opting in, the rules you want to opt in? I mean, my idea is different than his, and I killed him. Sorry.
Let me get to it. I will answer your question in a sec. I actually realized something about what this gentleman asked. Excuse me, sir. There's one thing that maybe there was a misunderstanding. If you incorporate in our zone, then you're like Apple or Microsoft. You are a corporation, and you're not operating inside the US. One of the things that we do plan on doing is making incorporation very, very easy. It'll be as easy as going to 1&1 or GoDaddy. 3 clicks and you're incorporated. So, okay. Cool. All right.
Don't take him out.
Kool-Aid. There's just so many mixed metaphors here. Sir, yes. So your question was about competition. I think it's an excellent question.
Not about competition.
No, it is competition. Let me explain why. Because what we intend to do is we are going to provide the thinnest platform of law possible. We see governance as a platform. And so we will provide the minimum laws that we can provide to make sure that society functions. Beyond that, different people will be able to opt in to different regulations. Now, this can be, it's a bit difficult to explain in 1 minute, but I'll explain it through a metaphor. Today, if you sign an agreement in the state of California, you can have that any dispute in that agreement adjudicated by the state of California, or you can, within that agreement, opt in to have a third-party arbitration company arbitrate the agreement, and they choose the laws. So that's actually a way for you to opt out contractually into a different kind of law. We are going to be expanding that opportunity beyond corporate law into civil law, and in some cases, criminal law as well.
Your ideas intrigue me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter. Your site's empty and your Twitter's empty. Should just keep an eye on Twitter.
Yes, because we've been very careful to keep everything empty at the moment, and the fact that it's there now means that we're going to be changing that from now.
Cool.
We want to provide full transparency as soon as possible, and we will be doing that. We expect, like I say, by November.
Hello, my name is David. I'm wondering, you mentioned that there is a nation state that will be sponsoring you,
yes,
or hosting the country. What role will that nation state play in the whole process in setting up the government?
Excellent
things
question.
like military, police force, things like that.
So there are limitations on what we are allowed to do. The key limitations are we will not be allowed to maintain our own military. We'll be able to maintain a security force, which is adequate to protect us, but not adequate to invade other countries. We will not be able to have our own foreign policy, although we will be able to sign agreements with multinational corporations or with other countries. We just aren't allowed to have embassies or a proper foreign policy. We will accept the foreign policy of the host country, and we will not be providing citizenship. The citizenship is only provided by the host country, although we are allowed to provide residency, and we will have our own immigration policy.
Okay. And what is their incentive in seeing the formation of this new state?
They understand that freedom provides prosperity. They've seen it happen in Hong Kong. They've seen it happen in Singapore, and they want it to happen in their own country. They are excellent people who are in an impossible situation where even if you have the best people in government, it does no good. And they realize that cryptocurrencies are something, we've helped explain this, that cryptocurrencies are something special, and they have the potential to become the next financial center of the world.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to be here until the end of the conference. I'll stay here for a few minutes, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who would like to be involved or ask more questions. Thank you very much.